The tea hit her face before she even registered the hand that threw it. Aldous felt the scald first, then the laughter, then the particular silence that fell over a garden party when everyone waits to see whether the maid will cry. She did not cry. She had learned, a long time ago, that crying in front of people who wanted to see it only fed them longer. "Clumsy thing," the woman in the ivory dress said, already turning back to her champagne. "Clean it up before someone slips." Wren knelt on the flagstones of Calloway House's east lawn in her gray uniform, sugar water drying tacky on her collarbone, and reached for the cloth at her belt. Her hands did not shake. They never shook. 9 years of factory town poverty, and one dead father had trained the shake out of her a long time before the Calloway estate ever trained her to curtsy. "My name is Wren Aldous. I am 24 years old, an omega with no suppressant budget to spare, and no family left in this city, but a 9-year-old brother with a heart that skips beats it shouldn't skip. I have scrubbed these flagstones for 2 years. I have never once, in 2 years, seen the woman who owns them." She wrung the cloth into her bucket and did not look up as the guests drifted back to their champagne towers, already bored of her. Somewhere above the lawn, behind glass on the 4th floor, a shape stood very still at a window, watching the girl on her knees clean up what someone else had spilled. If you're already leaning into a story where the quiet ones turn out to be the strongest ones in the room, go ahead and subscribe to the channel before we keep going, because this one earns it. The shape at the window was Imogen Calloway, and the staff called her the Calloway Ice Queen when they thought the walls couldn't hear them, which was often because Imogen had trained herself young to make no sound at all. She watched the maid finish the humiliation without a single wasted motion, watched her stand, tuck a stray curl behind her ear, and walk back toward the service door with her chin exactly level, and something in Imogen's chest did the thing it had not done in 6 years, which was notice. She did not go down. She never went down. She had a board call in 11 minutes and a father's ghost in every room of this house that still expected her to be cold, so she let the curtain fall and turned back to her desk and told herself that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. At midnight, from the tinted back seat of a car she had told her driver to park 2 blocks from the service gate, Imogen watched the same maid slip out into the dark in a thin coat, one gloved hand pressed flat against her chest pocket, where, Imogen would learn, sat a small dented tin purse that had belonged to a dead man, holding a week's unopened pay. Wren did not go home. She went the other way, toward the part of the city where the streetlights gave up. Imogen told her driver to wait. Then, for the first time in longer than she could remember, the Calloway Ice Queen got out of her own car in the dark and followed someone on foot. The building Wren disappeared into had no sign, only a hand-painted number over the door, 114 Harrow Lane, and a light burning behind a curtain that had been mended so many times it was more thread than cloth. Imogen stood across the street in a coat, with the collar up, telling herself she would watch for 5 minutes and leave. She had meetings. She had a company that did not run itself. She had absolutely no reason to be standing in an alley at midnight because a housemaid's spine had refused to bend under a stranger's cruelty. Through the window she watched Wren shed the thin coat, roll her sleeves, and become someone else entirely. An old man in a threadbare cardigan met her at the door, Dr. Okafor, though Imogen didn't know his name yet, only that his hands trembled with age and hers did not. Inside, on cots along the walls, were perhaps a dozen people the city had stopped counting. In the corner, a small boy convulsed. "Sami's temperature's past 40, Dr. Okafor said, voice cracking with exhaustion. We're out of the fever compound. Pharmacies close till 6. Then we go to the one on Ashworth, Wren said, already moving, already counting bills out of the tin purse onto the table without a second's hesitation. It's 4 blocks. I'll run it. It's locked after midnight, girl, you know that. Then I'll knock until someone with a key remembers I'm not going away. Imogen crossed the street before she had decided to. The bell over the shelter door made Wren turn, cloth in hand, expecting trouble. What she found instead was a tall stranger in an expensive coat, dark hair scraped back, eyes the exact gray of a sky before snow. You'll be arrested for loitering outside a locked pharmacy at this hour, Imogen said. Not if the owner opens the door for me. He won't. Then I'll be arrested for something that actually helped somebody, Wren said. Move, please. You're blocking the only door that matters right now. Imogen did not move. She took out her phone instead and dialed a number that answered on the first ring at any hour of the day or night, because it belonged to a man who owed Calloway Holdings a great deal, more than a favor. This is Imogen Calloway, she said. Open Ashworth Pharmacy. Now, the silence that followed had weight. Wren felt it settle over her skin like a change in air pressure before a storm, and something under the bergamot and antiseptic of the shelter reached her, cardamom, and something colder beneath it, like frost slicked over stone. You're her, Wren said slowly, the one who never comes down for her own garden parties, and you're the one who cleans up other people's messes and then runs into the dark to clean up more of them for free. Imogen's gaze didn't waver. Sami, that's the boy's name? How do you? Get him what he needs. I'll handle the door. The pharmacist arrived within 10 minutes, furious and unpaid until Imogen quietly informed him otherwise. Wren carried the fever compound back through the dark at a dead run, her tin purse 3 bills lighter, and by the time the sky over Harrow Lane had gone the color of a healing bruise, Sami's fever had broken, and Wren Aldis had learned 2 things she would not soon forget: that the Calloway Ice Queen's scent, up close, was nothing like the ice everyone said covered her, and that when the same woman looked at her and said, quietly, I have a position open at the foundation, and I think you should take it, it did not sound like charity. It sounded like being seen. Wren said yes before she let herself think about why. The transfer papers took 4 days. The disbelief on the household's face took considerably longer. You, Delphine Ashcroft said flatly, watching Wren carry a single case of belongings up the east staircase she had spent 2 years scrubbing from the outside. Foundation liaison. You can't even read a balance sheet. I can read one better than most people who've never had to make one balance on $9, Wren said, and kept walking, because Mrs. Yates, the only person in this house who had ever handed her a warm meal without being asked twice, had told her once that the fastest way to lose a fight with Delphine was to have it at all. Her new office sat 2 doors from Imogen's own, which felt less like promotion and more like being placed under glass. The desk was real mahogany. The window looked out over gardens instead of alleys. On her second evening, a tray appeared without request, chamomile tea, steeped strong, with far too much honey, exactly, precisely, the way her mother used to make it. A detail Wren was almost certain she had mentioned once, in passing, in the dark of the shelter, and never expected anyone to remember. She stood holding the cup a long moment before she drank it. That was the first proof. It would not be the last. The photograph she found 3 weeks later was not hidden, exactly, only private, tucked into a drawer of Imogen's private study while Wren was returning an audited file, a girl of 11 or 12 grinning gap, toothed under a rain-battered tin roof, dark hair plastered to her forehead, alive with a joy that did not match anything Wren had seen on the living Calloway face. Her name was Marisol, Imogen said from the doorway, and Ren startled. Because she had not heard her come in, the woman moved like weather changing, no warning at all. My sister. I didn't mean to, I know. Imogen crossed the room, took the photograph gently from her hand, set it face down without looking at it again. You should ask me about her sometime. When there's time to answer properly, their fingers brushed over the closing of the drawer, and neither of them pulled away as fast as they should have. It was Kiara Reyes, the house steward, who ended the moment, appearing in the hall with a leather ledger under his arm and an urgency that did not match his usual oiled calm. Foundation accounts need auditing tonight, he said, eyes flicking, once, twice, to Ren. Discrepancies in last quarter's disbursements. I'll need Miss Aldis's signature confirming receipt of every withdrawal she's processed. Tonight, Imogen repeated. The board meets at 9 tomorrow. It cannot wait. Reyes's smile did not reach anywhere near his eyes. I'm sure Miss Aldis has nothing to worry about. Ren watched him go and felt, for the first time since crossing this threshold, the cold draft of something closing in behind her. Imogen told her the truth 2 nights later, in the small hours, in the study with the photograph still face down in its drawer. I've funded Harrow Lane for 6 years, she said. Anonymously, Dr. Okafor knows me only as Patron M. No one else was ever supposed to know. Why? Imogen was quiet long enough that Ren thought she wouldn't answer. Then, my father built an empire on the principle that weakness gets you nothing but pity, and pity is worthless currency. When Marisol got sick, rheumatic fever, the kind that starts small and eats a heart from the inside, he delayed calling a physician for 6 days because we were mid-negotiation on an acquisition, and he didn't want the market to smell blood in the family. 6 days. By the time the doctor came, there wasn't enough heart left to save. Imogen, I was 17. I promised her, at the end, that no child would ever again wait on a Calloway's convenience to be seen by someone who could help them. Her voice did not break, but something in it went very still, the way water goes still right before it freezes all the way through. It wasn't kindness that funded that shelter for 6 years, Ren. It was penance. You are the first person who ever walked into that building and made me think it could also be something else. Ren reached for her hand across the desk, and Imogen let her take it, and for one unbroken minute the entire cold architecture of the Calloway Ice Queen simply set itself down. Then the study door opened without a knock, and 2 of the house's private security stood in the frame with Kiara Reyes a pace behind them, ledger open in his hands, his expression arranged into something that wanted very badly to look like regret. I'm sorry, Miss Calloway, he said. There's a discrepancy of $190,000 in foundation disbursements, authorized under Miss Aldis's employee code, wired to an account that traces to nowhere. I didn't want to believe it either. Ren's hand went cold in Imogen's before either of them said a word. They put her in the East Guest wing, not a cell, but the lock on the outside of the door made the distinction feel academic. Marta's son, Imogen's head of security, stood watch with the flat, unreadable face of a woman doing a job she clearly hated, arms crossed, gaze fixed somewhere over Ren's shoulder rather than on her. I didn't take it, Ren said, for perhaps the 9th time, to no one in particular. Not my call, Marta said. Sit tight. By midnight, sitting tight had become impossible for a different reason entirely. Ren's suppressant dose was 3 days overdue. She'd been too busy defending her own name to remember to eat, let alone medicate, and her body, under the stress of accusation and confinement, made its own decision about the timing. The first wave hit like a held breath finally released. Heat climbed her spine and pooled low, and beneath the door, faint at first and then unmistakable, marigold and warm bread bloomed through the hallway, sweet enough to reach every nose in the wing. Imogen smelled it from 3 doors down and was moving before she'd finished the thought. "You can't go in there," Marta said, planting herself in front of the door. "Reyes will use it. Alpha alone with the accused mid-heat, he'll spin it into something ugly by morning. Then I'll be careful," Imogen said. "Open it." She went in and shut the door behind her and stood very still against it, several feet of cold air deliberately held between them, while Wren curled on the edge of the bed with her arms wrapped around her own knees, sweating, humiliated, furious at her own body for betraying her at the worst possible hour. "Don't," Wren said, voice raw. "Don't look at me like Don't pity me on top of everything else. I'm not pitying you." Imogen's voice was low, level, careful in a way Wren had never heard it. "I'm trying very hard not to cross this room, because every instinct in me wants to, and I need you to tell me if that's what you want too. Say the word, and I stay right here by this door all night. Say stop. And I stop. Ask me with your words, Wren." Wren lifted her head. Sweat-damp hair, red-rimmed eyes, and under it all, still, that steadiness that had never once left her, not on her knees on the lawn, not running through the dark with a dying boy's medicine in her fist. "Don't stop," she said. "Just don't let it be here. Not like this. Not with him outside deciding what it means." Imogen crossed half the distance and no further, close enough that Wren could feel the cold coming off her skin like relief, and pressed her mouth once, gently, to Wren's forehead, not her lips, not yet, a promise instead of a claim, and stayed there through the worst of the fever's climb, murmuring nothing but "I'm here. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere," until the door opened again near 2 a.m, and Marta stood there with a folder in her hand and something like triumph fighting through her exhaustion. "Found this taped under Reyes's desk drawer," she said. "Ledger page. Real one. His handwriting, not hers." Imogen took it, read 3 lines, and went very quiet in the particular way that meant someone was about to regret a great many decisions. "Get him under watch," she said. "Quietly, he doesn't know we have this yet." The heat broke by dawn, and Imogen did not leave the room once in the hours between. They moved Wren to Imogen's own wing the next evening, no lock on any door this time, and it was there, in the small hours over a second attempt at chamomile tea that came out too weak and then, on the 3rd try, exactly right, that the rest of it came out. "My father worked the assembly line at Kestrel Iron until a crane cable snapped and took his spine with it," Wren said. Wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of frost and cardamom now, instead of just her own fear. "I was 19. I'd already been accepted to nursing college, full scholarship, everything, and I deferred it to cover his hospital bills, and then he died anyway, and the debt didn't. Toby was 5. Somebody had to work, and it wasn't going to be a 9-year gap between then and my diploma. So I scrub floors instead of setting bones, and I read every medical text I can borrow, and twice a week I go do at Harrow Lane what I was supposed to be doing in an actual hospital by now." "You never went back. There was never money to go back with." Imogen was quiet, turning her cup slowly in her hands. "The playhouse in that photograph. Marisol and I built the roof out of scrap tin because our father wouldn't fund anything that didn't return dividends, and it was the loudest, most wonderful sound in the world when it rained. I haven't heard rain on tin since she died." A pause. "You mentioned once at the shelter that you loved that sound. I didn't think you noticed you'd said it out loud." "I notice everything I don't have," Wren said quietly. It's a habit poor people keep. Then let me be the thing you don't have to notice missing anymore. It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't even quite a confession. But when Ren set her cup down and let her fingers lace through Imogen's, both of them understood exactly what it was, and for 1 full hour, before a phone rang and shattered it. The house held nothing colder than the tea going lukewarm between them. The call was Mrs. Yates, breathless. "Miss Aldous, it's your brother." The school called. He collapsed at recess. "They've taken him to St. Perpetua's." Ren was on her feet before the sentence finished. St. Perpetua's kept Toby overnight for observation, a flare of the arrhythmia they'd been monitoring since he was 6. Frightening, but this time survivable. Ren sat by his bed until 3 in the morning with his small hand in hers, and did not notice, until Imogen's car idled outside for the 2nd night running, that someone had quietly settled every outstanding balance on his chart before she'd even asked. She should have known that kindness, arriving that fast and that quiet, meant someone was tightening a different kind of noose elsewhere. Callum Reyes vanished from Calloway House sometime before dawn on the 3rd day, along with $200,000 in liquidated foundation assets, and every ledger that might have proven the fraud predated Ren's employment by 6 years. What he left behind, instead, was a call to a reporter he'd cultivated for exactly this purpose, and a story that ran by that afternoon under a headline designed to be read at a glance, and believed without a second one: Calloway Foundation Maid charged in charity theft meant for sick children. They arrested her outside the hospital, in front of the same sneering socialite crowd that had watched her clean spilled tea off her own face 2 months earlier, cameras catching every second of it. Someone in the crowd laughed. It was the same laugh as before, only louder now, fed by an audience. Imogen arrived 4 minutes too late to stop the handcuffs and, for the camera's benefit, said nothing at all, her face a mask of the coldest indifference the tabloids had ever photographed, because the alternative, in that exact moment, would have handed Reyes the confirmation he needed that she cared enough to be manipulated through Ren. It was, Ren understood later, the cruelest kindness anyone had ever done her. In the moment, riding in the back of a police car, with her wrists zip-tied and her brother's hospital room still smelling of antiseptic in her memory, it felt like the coldest betrayal of her life. And somewhere between the precinct and a holding cell that smelled of bleach and old fear, Ren Aldous, furious, humiliated, wrongly accused, and completely unwilling to spend 1 more hour of her life being written off as small, decided she was done waiting for someone else to prove her innocent. "Give me a pen and every disbursement date you have," she told the detective assigned to her case, voice flat and clear. "I balanced that shelter's books in my head for 2 years because there was never money for software. I know exactly what an honest ledger looks like. I can show you precisely where this one stops being honest, and I can tell you it isn't on any page with my name on it." It took her 6 hours and 11 pages, and by the end of it, the detective had gone very quiet and asked her, twice, whether she'd ever considered forensic accounting as a career. "I considered a lot of things," Ren said. Poverty makes the choosing simple. While Ren dismantled Reyes's fraud pattern 1 date at a time from a holding cell, Marta traced the liquidated assets to a countryside property 2 hours north that Reyes had quietly purchased under a shell company 4 years earlier. The same year, it turned out, the discrepancies in the foundation ledger began. Worse, Toby wasn't in his hospital bed when Mrs. Yates went to check on him that evening. A man matching Reyes's description had signed him out as a family courier, forged papers and all, 20 minutes before anyone thought to ask questions. Imogen received the news standing in her own study, in front of the drawer that still held her sister's photograph, and something in her that had held perfectly, glacially still for 6 years finally, completely let go. "Get the car," she said to Marta. Now, they found the countryside lodge just past midnight, Toby locked in an upstairs room, frightened but unharmed, and Reyes in the study below with a bag half-packed and a pistol he hadn't expected to need until headlights swept the drive. "You should have stayed cold," he told Imogen, backing toward the window with the gun raised, unsteady. "Your father understood. Feelings get people killed in this business. I only ever took what the company would have wasted on charity anyway." "You stole from sick children to fund your escape," Imogen said, stepping between him and the staircase where Wren, released 2 hours earlier once her ledger analysis cleared her name, and refusing to wait anywhere but in the car behind Imogen's, was already running up toward her brother's voice. "That's not business. That's just cruelty with a spreadsheet." Reyes's hand shook. The shot went wide, into the doorframe, and Imogen closed the distance in 3 strides and put him on the ground before he could raise the weapon again, one knee in his back, both hands twisting it from his grip with a violence that had 6 years of grief behind it and no intention of stopping there. "Imogen," Wren's voice. From the stairs, Toby's hand gripped tight in hers. "Look at me. He's caught. He's done. Don't become the thing your father was. Let the law finish this one." Imogen's hands stilled. The cold fury did not vanish, but it folded itself back down into something that could hand a man over to the authorities instead of ending him where he lay. "Cuff him," she told Marta. "And call the detective who's been reviewing Wren's ledger work. Tell her we found the rest of her evidence." Reyes's arraignment made the same papers that had run Wren's arrest photo 2 weeks earlier, this time beneath a headline that named him. In full, and beneath it, in smaller print, a formal statement from Callaway Holdings clearing Wren Aldis of all wrongdoing and confirming, for the first time publicly, 6 years of anonymous funding to Harrow Lane's free clinic under the name Patron M. Imogen didn't stop there. She called a press conference of her own 2 days later, in the same garden where Wren had once knelt and spilled tea while a crowd laughed, and stood at a podium in front of every reporter who'd printed the theft story without checking it twice. Callum Reyes embezzled just under $1.1 million from this foundation over 6 years. And when he was on the verge of being caught, he chose to destroy an innocent woman's reputation rather than answer for his own choices, Imogen said, voice carrying to every corner of the lawn. That woman identified the fraud pattern from memory in a holding cell faster than my own auditors managed in a week. Her name is Wren Aldis. She is the reason Harrow Lane's clinic is still standing after 6 years, and as of this morning, she is its incoming director of medical services, fully funded, fully credentialed, on a scholarship this foundation is proud to underwrite in full. The same crowd that had laughed twice now applauded, and Wren, standing at the edge of the lawn with Toby's hand in hers and Dr. Okafor beaming beside her, felt something in her chest finally, fully unclench. Delphine Ashcroft was let go by the end of the week, quietly, for the falsified staff reports that had helped Reyes build his case against Wren in the first place. No one applauded that. No one needed to. That night, in Imogen's study, with the photograph of Marisol finally set upright on the desk, instead of hidden face down in a drawer, Imogen knelt in front of Wren, not for a ring, not yet, but for something that mattered more. "Ask me with your words," Wren said softly, echoing the phrase back to her, "if this is what you want." "I have wanted this since I watched you kneel on my own lawn and refused to let a room full of cruel people decide what you were worth," Imogen said. "Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me you're mine, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving I heard you." "I'm yours," Wren said, and bared her throat. and Imogen's mouth found the gland at the curve of her neck, with a gentleness that undid every cold thing anyone had ever said about her, the bite settling in like a door finally closing on the right side of a threshold, cardamom and frost slicked stone flooding warm around marigold and fresh bread until neither scent stood alone anymore. The proposal came 3 months later, not with the tin purse that had been retired, empty and dented, to a shadow box in the foyer, but with a small ring box shaped, deliberately, like a tiny replica of it, tin-colored and hand-dented to match. Imogen knelt on the same lawn. "Marry me," she said, "and let me spend every winter after this one proving that being seen was never charity. It was always just the truth, arriving late." Wren said yes before the sentence finished, the same way she'd once said yes to a job offer from a stranger, with frost in her voice and warmth underneath it. They bonded fully at the wedding 6 weeks after that, small vows exchanged under a tin-roofed pavilion Imogen had commissioned to be built for the occasion. Because some sounds, once you have someone to share them with, are worth hearing again. "I will always come back before the medicine runs out," Imogen said, echoing the promise she'd made herself outside Harrow Lane's door on the first night. And Wren, laughing through tears, answered, "I'm counting on it." A year on, Harrow Lane's shelter had become the Marisol Aldous Calloway Free Clinic, its tin roof audible from the street every time it rained, Dr. Okafor still on staff and grinning wider than anyone remembered. Toby, fully recovered after a corrective surgery Wren herself assisted in observing, had taken to informing every visitor, unprompted, that his sister was basically a doctor and also married a queen. Marta, who had never in 15 years seen Imogen wait on anyone, told Wren once, gruffly, over the sound of hammering as the new pediatric wing went up, that she'd stopped placing bets a long time ago on when the Ice Queen would finally thaw, because she'd never imagined it would be this thoroughly. On a quiet morning 8 months after the wedding, sunlight came in low and gold across the foyer of the house that had once locked Wren behind a door, and settled on the little dented tin purse under its glass case, empty now of pay and worry both, holding instead 2 plain worn wedding bands that came off every night before bed, and went back on every morning without fail. Being invisible had never been the truth of her. It had only ever been what a world too careless to look twice had settled for instead. The truth had been there all along, in steady hands and counted coins, and a girl who gave everything away and never once asked to be thanked for it, waiting, quietly, for someone willing to finally, completely see her. The end. If this one got you somewhere in the chest, the tin purse, the tin roof, a girl who gave everything away and got seen anyway, that's exactly the kind of story this channel is built on, so go ahead and subscribe before you go, so you don't miss the next one. I'd love to know in the comments, what do you think finally cracked Imogen's cold exterior for good? The night at Harrow Lane? Or the night she stood outside that locked door and refused to cross it without being asked? Tell me your answer below. Until the next story, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.